same LSD story every time, and we've all heard it. Young man on acid thought he could fly, jumped out of a building. What a tragedy.
Sometimes a Patreon will make a request, and it'll be a game that I've never heard of before, and I have to take my approach with these kinds of reviews with a certain amount of care. Did that person request this game because they loved it, or because they hated it, or because they just don't see that many videos on YouTube about it? Why bring this to my door? The game in question this time was Metabolis, which I originally read as Metabolis, which I guess makes just as much sense. But anyway, Metabolis, presumably a reference to metabolism, is a game that, for the first time in ages, makes me feel completely weirded out. It's not that it's scary or creepy or anything like that. It's simply a game from a very specific era of gaming where nothing makes sense, like a drug-fueled hallucination. Sometimes you just don't know if what you're looking at and what you're hearing can be trusted. It's confusing and bizarre, and I think that's just one of the reasons the game ended up being suggested to me. It gives me itchy skin. I can feel my pupils dilating every time I switch it on. Released by Gremlin Graphics and coded by Chris Kerry, a name you may be familiar with thanks to standout titles like Alvidas in Monty, Moly Christmas, Bounder, and Jack and the Beanstalk. The story that's found on the inlay to this coded nightmare gives you a pretty decent indication of the madness you're about to endure. Before your eyes, your friends, your family are rendered helpless, transformed to lesser beings, birds and mice, by invading Kremlins. But by cruel twist of fate, the transformation leaves you with the body of a bird, but the brain of a human. You are the last chance the human race has left. Okay, fair enough. It's not the most outlandish of Spectrum stories, granted, but coupled with the loading screen, or even the image on the front of the box, I can't help but wonder just how many tabs of LSD it takes to come up with something like this. Did the story come first, or was that added in once everything else had been put in place? Either way, it doesn't make me feel any less weird. Did you hear something? Anyway, getting further into the instructions, it states, the objective is to search the Kremlin domain for the reversal serum, which changes you back into a man. You must then destroy the area, for which you need 4 pieces of nuclear fuel. Take them to the reactor room and escape from the complex before the reactor explodes. So now, this is where the boundaries of sanity are starting to get a little stretched. You and your family have been turned into animals. I can take that. But using nuclear fuel to blow up a reactor as well. Jesus Christ. Oh, but don't worry, it carries on. There are various life forms who help you during your quest. In particular, the wizard, who is able to cure you of all ailments, but only when you are in natural form. Okay, are you keeping up here? We've got people turning into animals by Kremlins. It's never explained what Kremlins are, but based on the sprites, I think there might be aliens. You need to blow up the level using nuclear fuel in a reactor, and there are wizards knocking about. Do you want another layer of weird on top of that? Okay, well, there's the fact that you, as a bird, can throw a boomerang. According to the instructions, the boomerang is hidden somewhere within the maze, and the only reason it hurts the Kremlins is because boomerangs are poisonous to them. Yeah, okay, fine. In order to gain the boomerang, you have to pick up a skull and crossbones. Again, okay, yeah, fine, let's go with that, whatever. Also, because you're a bird, you've got a weak heart, so you have to make sure you don't have a heart attack and die. You know, just to make it a bit more realistic, just to make this game about aliens and wizards and poisonous boomerangs and bird transformations more realistic, it needed that bit of bird biology in there. It wouldn't make sense if we don't add the heart attack thing into the game, because birds have weak hearts. We need to add that in. We need it to make sense. God, my head. If we take a look at the game itself, things don't necessarily get any easier to pass. You are a bird, correct, that's simple enough to see, and movement is controlled with Q and W for left and right, O to fly up, and the beautiful forces of gravity to move down. All well and good, simple as they come, but the maze-like structure of this world is convoluted and confusing. Blocks of Technicolor change into villages, change into nuclear reactors, change into hellfire and torment. Kremlins materialize and chase you down, and Prior to you finding your boomerang, there's no way to fight back. You are a bird, flying through this strange landscape, and across its every extreme there are birds of a different colour. They're the brightest cast of characters in the Australian story. Sorry, let me start again. In the bottom left, you have a health meter. This is typically affected by flying into the Kremlins, which isn't something you can avoid a lot of the time. Their appearance and movement is about as random as the rest of the game, so you just have to try and deal with it as best you can. In the bottom right is your heart rate, because why not give you multiple health bars? That's always fun to deal with. If your heart rate gets too high, then you'll die. It's not particularly clear what affects this. I think it might just be flying around or moving, but honestly, nothing is clear in this game. Nothing. There are items you pick up to slow your heart rate. You'll be unsurprised to hear that those items are undisclosed pills. There is food that you can pick up. This will improve your health. There are other items too, and it's here where things get back to being very weird again. None of the pickups particularly make any sense, at least not at first. They're not explained in the game's inlay. You're essentially left to work out what the hell it is that they actually do by playing the game. There's a pillar or column that you can pick up. There's a road sign with a 15-mile-per-hour warning on it. There are other things you can pick up, but honestly, just explaining these two alone will give you some idea as to how obtuse all of this is. When you pick up one of these items, you'll find they appear in your inventory at the bottom. I think, from my own experience, they just stay there for a set amount of time before disappearing, whether they get used or not. So consider them on a time limit, possibly. The pillar, or column, will stop you from being crushed by blocks that pop out of the ceiling. If you don't have the column in your inventory when you walk under one of these, you'll become a squashed bird for a bit, meaning you can't fly. Okay? Got that? That's what that's for. The 15-mile-per-hour sign, a little more confusing. It stops this punching glove from punching you in the face. And let me tell you, this thing will absolutely hammer you from one side of the map to the other depending on which one you haphazardly come across. It takes a swing at you and you score points by striking your opponent. Those strikes sometimes hurt and sometimes look, I mean, here is the conundrum for boxers. To incapacitate a man for 10 seconds and not a lifetime.
It is a beautiful sport.
What is going on?
Come on.
I know. I think it pains me. That's the trouble, because we're talking about it at such a sensitive.
Sorry. Let me start again.
How about we took?
What? Metabolis?
Aye, smack.
Sorry. Let me start again. Nothing about this makes sense. On the face of it, the game is a simple maze game, but the pieces that hold it together are tangled and knotted and confusing, and it's difficult. Having 2 health bars to maintain is bad enough, but when a fiery wall randomly appears from nowhere and insta-kills you, it leaves you with a feeling of, well, that was unfair, and also, just as confusing as everything else. You see, Metabolis isn't a small game. There are 150 screens looping and swirling around each other to form this giant maze of confusion. To succeed at the game, you need to remember the exact flight path to get to each of your relevant goals, and that's easier said than done. Even if your goals are forever static, there are dead ends everywhere, traps to avoid, Kremlins to deal with, and none of it is clear or signposted in any way. You're left to fend for yourself in this giant mess. You're left to contemplate why a road sign with the number 15 printed on it could possibly stop a boxing glove from hitting you in the face. You're left trying to contemplate why you reached the domain of the reversal serum and the game went batshit insane and you appeared somewhere else entirely. You're left to ponder how on earth anyone ever managed to figure any of this out. Even on returning to your human form, there's no semblance of normality to proceedings. Your man swims through the air like an elegant swan in search of wizards and nuclear reactors, avoiding portcullises and injecting himself with needles. And I just can't help but feel that
I'm not the same person I was before I started playing this game.
It is so out of reach of comprehension at times. It's simple mechanics of basically moving around a maze collecting things. It's been done 1,000 times before, but it's the layers of weirdness on top of that. It's the story, the premise, the sheer druggery.
Let me start again.
Can I recommend this? I honestly think that's going to depend on the person. If you're someone who likes to map out, either physically or in your head, a vast maze, and within that maze try to work out what the hell it is you're supposed to do, while an onslaught of bizarre imagery and bird-themed chaos happens around you, then yes, it's fair to say that you'll enjoy Metabolis. It's not easy, it's often unfair, but it's certainly interesting, if not exactly fun to play. It's a game that's designed for those who enjoy the simple pleasure of exploring a wide open space, gradually introducing some wrinkles into their smooth brain as the game slowly starts to make sense. Not because it actually makes sense, but because you've spent so long wrapped in its tendrils that you start to see, hear, and feel differently. You never necessarily get Metabolis. You sacrifice a small piece of your brain to the altar of Chris Kerry, and Metabolis gets you. If you struggle to make sense of that sentence, you haven't played Metabolis enough.